good morning, or good afternoon, depending upon where you're at. My name is Rob Mattern, and I'm here with Corey Reiner, and we are excited to present Surging Costs in 2025, Part 2. Part 1 we did last month, and we're picking up the other areas that we did not cover. And again, we can even, if someone's interested, we could refer back or send you a recording of the first session. But what we're going to talk about today is really what's going on in the marketplaces for these each individual areas, what kind of increases that we're seeing out there, some strategies in order to combat these increases, and some of the challenges that firms are facing. So we're going to get started here. We got some housekeeping items that I'd like to talk about. Just to give you a little introduction, who we are and what we do. We are consultants for law firms focusing on office and administrative services, information governance, and records. We're unbiased. We're not affiliated with any vendor, any service provider, and we help firms either improve services in-house or if they're outsourced. Focus, as I already mentioned, or if I was muted, I apologize for that, is that we're going to focus on the overview of the marketplaces, different service areas that we're going to talk about today, the increases that firms are experiencing, what challenges are out there, and then strategies to avoid these increases and how to decrease your costs moving forward. I'm here with Corey Reiner. Corey's been with us 4 years, comes from 10 years at R.R. Donnelly, Williams Lee, and Epic, managing their offsite administrative center. So he's an expert in that area. Also, too, he handles a lot of our office supplies outsourcing projects. From a housekeeping viewpoint, everyone's on mute. If you'd like to speak or submit a question, take yourself off mute. Otherwise, please stay on mute to keep background noise down. We're going to touch on each of these areas. Now, we got a finite amount of time here. So if someone goes into a lot of details or there's questions about details, we will take that offline and follow up with you to set up a time to talk about it. And last but not least, you should have received your Starbucks gift cards yesterday. So grab your coffee, and first 25 people who did sign up are also getting an autographed copy of the Mattern Method book. But grab your coffees and we'll get started. Agenda for today, we're going to cover Mattern 101. This is a little piece we did last time around that was very popular, a lot of questions about it, but just how we approach projects and what we're looking for. We're going to talk about administrative services, outsourcing, office supplies, output, printers and MFDs, information governance, digital migration. Huge area. It's going to become more and more critical as time goes by. We're going to talk about Maddie, and I'll save that. That's going to be a little surprise. And then last but not least, Mattern Pilot. Now, we have a number of questions already submitted. We're going to address those at the end. Again, submit your questions in chat if you have any during this presentation. And if we don't get to anything, we will follow up afterwards. So Mattern 101, these are, we've been in business 28 years, have handled over 500 engagements, and there's certain principles that we live by in here. And number one is, pricing is important, no doubt about it, but contract terms definitely trump pricing. We'll spend time focusing on pricing, no doubt about it, and we'll get you a good price, but really we want to make sure that you get the right contract terms. And you should too. In any contract that you sign, you want to make sure the terms support your ultimate objective. Some people, offsite record storage is a perfect example. Some terms really handcuff you in regards to trying to get out of offsite record storage. So we want to make sure the terms are correct and they're in your best interest in really every contract that we do. It always amazes me how many firms just do a renewal with their current provider. There's a lot to be said if you're happy with your current provider and you just don't feel the need to make a change. That's great. However, when you do a renewal, you're leaving about half the savings, if not more, on the table. For instance, offset record storage, the average increase in offset record storage that we're seeing on a per cubic foot basis is 38%. So if you renew with that, your prices are automatically going up that amount. Okay, so we don't, and the best way to drive those prices down is a competitive situation. So again, renewals happen. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but let's make sure we do so intelligently. But an open competitive process would definitely drive the best savings for you. Also, too, just because you go through a competitive process, some firms are under the impression they got to make a change. Not necessarily. Okay, you can resign with your current vendor. Okay, you're just going out, taking a look at the market, getting market-based pricing. Doesn't mean you have to make a change. That being said, it's amazing to me how many firms say, hey, we'll go do an open competitive process, but we're not making a change. And they end up doing it because they look at what other vendors or service providers are offering, the pricing, terms, a different service level, a white glove service. They like that. So again, a competitive process doesn't mean you have to make a change, but a lot of firms do. Can't stress enough about monitoring the invoices and reporting. We find service providers will increase rates that are in your contract that you're contracted for. They're fixed, or their increases are capped at CPI or 3%, but they still increase. They create new charges. And again, I don't want to pick off the offset record storage service providers, but you know what? They start adding a handling fee. They do a dock fee. Okay, so check your invoices. We build into a lot of our contracts if a service is not performed, they miss a delivery or they're late per the performance standards that we put in there, we get a credit. We want to monitor those credits, make sure we're getting compensated for that. Many times when firms outsource certain services, they feel they don't have to manage that area anymore. And they're correct in a certain way that you don't have to manage from the employee viewpoint. However, you still have to manage that service provider. So just because you outsource a function or you sign a new contract and you do have performance standards, you still have to make sure the service provider is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then lastly, don't settle for mediocrity. So many people or firms out there, when we talk to them, they say, hey, I'm not really thrilled, but you know what? All these service providers are the same. They're not. That being said, a service provider that's only mediocre could do much better if you hold their feet to the fire, make them accountable. That's how you do it through performance standard, reporting, scorecards, etc. So don't settle just because you're not thrilled with the situation. You don't think anything is going to be improved by going through an RFP process or talking to other vendors. You got to get rid of that mentality. You don't want to settle for just mediocre service. I could guarantee you, when you sign that contract, that service provider didn't sit there and say, hey, listen, for this price, we're going to give you mediocre service. I can guarantee they didn't say that. They're going to say, hey, we're going to thrill you, we're going to provide excellent service, but hold them accountable to provide that. So, okay, we're going to jump right in. Administrative services. I tell you, just based upon the last Thomson Reuters survey, increasing about 8.6% this year, excluding lawyer comp. So there's a lot of things to talk about when we talk about administrative services. And I'm going to just bounce this off Corey. Corey, what are you seeing as the biggest challenges out there in the marketplace?
So I think, if probably everyone on this call has heard it before, but the LAA population is getting older. That's not the most attractive career path for kids these days. They're not in high school saying, I want to be an LAA. So it is difficult to find someone with that skill set because it is a pretty complex skill set. You have to have a lot of legal knowledge. You have to have knowledge of a lot of processes. So it is a complex position with a lot of responsibilities that attorneys have relied on greatly. So those people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years are looking at retiring. They're looking at moving away from the firm. And that puts the firm in a couple of different challenges. One is replacing those LAAs. If you want to maintain your current model, you're looking for a skill set that doesn't really exist now. So you're trying to put someone in a position where they're going to have a big learning curve. So a lot of firms look at peer firms or other local firms around to attract their LAAs away and bring them to your firm, which then increases the market rate for those employees. So they're probably making market rate at their current firm, so you're going to have to offer them a little more, and that's increasing costs.
But that's an
On the
opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the opportunity that a lot of firms have seized there with that challenge is changing that model rather than having a 5-to-1 ratio for LAAs to attorneys. They're establishing a new model, whether it's a centralized model, a pooled model. There are different ways that you can utilize your current staff, rearrange how it's structured, and make that staffing work for you. I think one of the challenges that we hear a lot is that I'm going to either pool these services or centralize these services, but what tasks should be in those groups? And that is a gap that is very common. A lot of firms, every firm knows exactly what the billable tasks for attorneys are. Most firms don't know what the non-billable tasks for LAAs are. That's something that just hasn't been tracked in the past. Some firms have started to do that recently, and it adds a lot of anxiety to creating pods that are going to provide services when you don't know exactly what tasks need to be transferred to those groups. And adding to that, attorneys aren't necessarily putting all of their non-billable tasks into the timekeeping system either. A lot of firms ask them to, but as long as they get their billable time in, there's not usually consequences for not adding the non-billable time. And frankly, adding non-billable time into a tracking system for an attorney is just another non-billable task that they don't want to do and takes away from their billable time. So there is a lot of uncertainty there, which makes restructuring your administrative services more challenging.
Okay, when we get have a project that we're looking at the administrative services, there's two ways to gather this information. One, put a workflow tooling and monitor it for 6 months to a year. The other way, we use a tool that is much quicker. And why don't you just take a minute and just talk about that?
Yeah. So when we encounter a firm that they're looking at potentially restructuring their administrative services, but there is a lot of uncertainty of what tasks need to be assigned. We don't want to create gaps. We don't want to have our attorneys be left without support for all of these non-billable items and then be forced to do them themselves. So we have a proprietary tool we use. It's a survey tool. It's about a 15 to 20-minute survey for an LAA to do. And essentially what it is it's a survey developed by law firm administrators specific to law firms. It has just about every task that anyone at a law firm would do on a daily basis, and has sliders where an LA would say, I spend 10% of my day on billing, for example, and then taking a typical day and extrapolating that to a year's worth of data gives us not only a list of tasks, hours associated with those tasks, and costs associated with those tasks, so that we can strategically develop pools or centralized groups that can handle all of those items, so that there isn't a service gap within the firm.
Okay. Okay, wrapping up administrative services, out of Get It Right, full centralized models, outsourcing workflow tool. What's the point you want to cover?
So I think getting it right is probably the most important. If you create a centralized group or pools to support attorneys and it's rough going for the first month, that's what attorneys are going to remember, and they're going to start handling those tasks themselves. They're going to start going to other people to complete those, and that group is going to be underutilized, and you're going to end up spending a lot of time trying to fix that mistake. So having that knowledge and setting it up for success from the beginning is probably the most important piece.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Also too, the Get It Right, another use of that is we want it really administrative services. We want to make sure the right people, which means trained, with the right cost are doing the right things. Okay, that's really the key to wrapping up, to really streamlining, making it efficient, is really getting the right people to do the right tasks at the right cost. So, okay, outsourcing. As soon as I get this slide moved, there we go. Okay, thoughts on outsourcing. What are we seeing out in the marketplace?
So demand going up 20 to 30% for outsourcing. Um, I think most firms, it's changed a little bit, but most firms, when they think of outsourcing tasks, they think of office services, reprographics. The copy print is what is outsourced. But in the last, I would say, 10 years, there's been a big expansion in administrative services, billing services, library services, marketing services, and providers have done a great job with it. They're doing great work, handling more complex tasks. They're saving firms a lot of soft cost money, just not having to manage it, not recruiting for those positions, and being able to benefit from best practices that providers are able to offer. Um, I think one of the other benefits to outsourcing has largely been viewed as it's going to save us money, but providers are also competing in the same labor market that firms are, so their costs are increasing because labor rates have gone up. So that's not necessarily the biggest driver to outsourcing. A lot of it is getting better work product from a provider who is serving many firms, has learned best practices, can create efficiencies where the firm may not have the management dedicated to a specific department. And I think those are the biggest drivers. I think not focusing on cost as much as creating the efficiencies and potentially reducing the number of employees in those positions is what drives that savings.
Okay, so not necessarily looking at what you're paying these people, but more how many people you have. Can we make it more efficient?
Absolutely.
Okay, can I do it in-house? If I'm a firm, I don't want to outsource. Can I create an off-site center of excellence that is as cost-effective and efficient as any outsourcing provider?
Absolutely. And there are firms that have done it. They've established either an administrative office in a different location that has lower labor costs so that they are saving on those labor rates, and creating essentially their own outsourcing office, where they're creating these centralized groups. Um, I think that it's a large undertaking, and a lot of firms don't want to do it, but it is definitely a viable option.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you want to cover on this?
I think one important piece is, and we just saw this with AmLaw 20 firm that we worked with, where they had been in a relationship with an outsourcing provider for about a decade. They had expanded their outsourced departments a lot. It's difficult once you've expanded a lot. You've created this long-standing relationship, and you have a lot of services there. You kind of feel like we're stuck. We can't possibly move all of these people to a new provider or in-house. That firm did go to an open RFP, and we evaluated it, and there were options out there. So even if you have a lot of services dedicated to a provider right now, that doesn't mean you're stuck there. It may be an important part of your firm, but there are options to transfer those services either to another provider, bring them back in-house. So never feel like you are so intertwined with a provider that you can't explore your options.
Okay, great point. And they did make a switch on their on-site services.
They did.
Okay, so okay, let's talk about office supplies. And we're talking about these big areas: administrative services, outsourcing. What when we sat down and listed all the areas that we work in, I'd tell you probably the biggest change is in office supplies, and that's what we included. So, Corey, how many office supplies RFPs are you doing right now?
I think right now I'm doing 4.
4.
So definitely a timely topic.
Okay, fire away. What are we seeing out there, and why is it kind of interesting?
So it's interesting for a few reasons. I think the biggest one is something that everyone's likely familiar with, is that costs for just about everything have gone up. Just since 2020, office supply costs have gone up about 20%. What we're seeing with firms is those traditional office supplies. So what everybody thinks about whenever they think of what are we stocking in the office, or paper, pens, folders, red welds, those type of things, those are decreasing or staying about the same. So spend there it's not a big concern for a lot of firms. It's kind of considered a cost of doing business. You're not going to stop getting paper. You're not going to stop buying pens. You have to get them from somewhere. So it kind of falls to the wayside as something, well, we're going to have to buy it, so let's just not spend a lot of time thinking about it. What we have seen in just about every firm that we've worked with over the past several years has been that snack, beverage, and break room services spend is going up drastically. So I would say probably 10 years ago, paper was a firm's biggest office supplies expense. Now it's snacks and beverages.
So
So
they're spending more on cashews and peanuts than they are on paper.
yes, in total. And there are a few reasons for that. Mostly, I hate mentioning COVID because it's in the past, but it is the biggest reason why the spend has run away. There were snack programs developed during COVID for the people that were still coming into the office to give them a benefit when a lot of folks were staying home and working from home. So those snack programs were increased during that time. And then following COVID, when firms were trying to entice employees back to the office, they further expanded. So then you started buying, if an attorney said, I would like Snickers, then you start buying Snickers, and you didn't replace another item, you just added it, and then you get a list of 400 or 500 snack items firm wide that you're buying. You may only buy 2 or 3 of the product over the course of a year, but it increases that risk, or that spend on snacks, and it decreases your spend on certain items, which then your office supplies provider isn't going to give you a huge discount because you're buying 2 boxes of Snickers a year. If you were to, and what we like to encourage is creating a snack and break room policy and budget so that there are parameters around that. So you're not just buying everyone's favorite snack and having it on hand all the time. You are managing to a budget, and what we like to see is a set of kind of core snack items, because I think every firm we've worked with has shared that while it was going fine, but then we had attorneys that traveled to a smaller office or traveled from a smaller office to a larger office and noticed they had all of these snack things and then started requesting them, and then we added those. And
Okay,
it's
go ahead.
and it's a way to it just leads to runaway spend there. So setting those parameters, developing a standard snack offering, and that doesn't mean you can't have special items, but I would recommend rotating those on a seasonal basis, monthly basis, having the standard snacks and then offering a couple of special items.
Okay, two quick comments that came in. One, admitting it's a huge area of spend, but with the hybrid work environment, unless people coming in the office, why don't you think it would be going down? And I'm
That
paraphrasing that question, Andrea.
that would be, I think, a logical conclusion. But the fact is that every firm, I think, anticipates that they're going to have higher attendance than they ultimately do. And
Okay.
a lot of office supplies providers, you have to buy in bulk, so you can't buy small numbers of those items, and they are perishable, so there can be waste associated with that, which we like to avoid.
Okay, and also too, we got firms that just want fresh snacks. They're offering that option. Just take 1 minute and talk about that.
Yeah, so some firms bring in fresh fruit. I think the most successful policy, if you're going to bring in fresh and perishable items, is, especially with fruit, bring it in, have the day that it arrives, and then once it's gone, or if it needs to be thrown out, it's a once a week offering and not something that is stocked fresh every day, because it can lead to an increase in costs when a lot of it is ends up being wasted.
Okay, so you're comfortable offering Snickers, but not apples.
Uh, yeah, don't tell my kids, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, output. Okay. Uh, Output, obviously, printers and MFDs, a couple of things happening. Costs have come down in that area. Now you're starting to get a lot of tariffs talk that, hey, listen, because of tariffs, we've got to increase our price and all this other kind of stuff. And we always say, hey, give it a week or so and those tariffs will be gone. And let's see how it shakes out. But the biggest change here, Corey, is probably volumes. Volumes have dropped through the floor on copies and prints.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right after COVID, everyone thought they were going to stay down, because of the remote environment, and there was an initial increase right as those return to office mandates started coming in, but we've started to see a decline again in the past couple of years.
And you're probably seeing that in your cost recovery revenue. Not revenue, but cost recovery of those costs. Biggest thing that we're seeing out, firms still have too much equipment. You have all these Porsches going 10 miles an hour out there with no flexibility under the contracts. And that's a big thing that we stress, that you want to get flexibility over volume, so like a zero-based contract, but also too over the equipment to be able to return equipment. Now, again, vendors don't like that. They want you to lock you into a hard lease or have you purchase them. But again, you want to have a certain portion of your population, I'll call them rentals almost, even at a competitive price. Okay. So that you have flexibility over a population. Firms are, again, over-equipped and have floors of equipment that are just paperweights. So what else going forward? What else are you seeing out there?
I think one of the newer things that we've seen from service providers for printers and MFDs is offering a flat fee for prints. So whether it's 100,000 copies you make a month or 1,000, they're offering a monthly cost for that. And it can be a good deal. We've seen it be very competitive and offer savings over a zero-based contract where you're paying per click and at a very low rate. But one thing to consider is your volumes. If they're consistently decreasing, look at that monthly cost and see if it makes sense for you. So don't just buy into it because it's going to save you money today. Think about what's going to happen 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road.
Or have some type of reset mechanism in there,
Yeah,
because there are certain
absolutely.
offset record storage vendors that like to have that fixed fee, regardless of your volume that you're storing. But we always want to get, because obviously the goal here is to destroy what's offsite if you can and drive that volume to zero. But if you're paying a fixed fee, you're not benefiting from destroying. So, okay, what else in equipment wise? Anything else that we're seeing out there?
Um, I think just going back to the flexibility, of course, based on volumes, and if your print volumes go down, you may want to remove a device to accommodate that. But a lot of firms are moving offices. We just had a firm that we work with just recently moved to a new office, and in their new space, they only had space for one MFD, whereas the previous had two. So having that flexibility was able to save them on that cost as they were moving it.
Okay, great points. Great points. Okay, we're gonna flow right in. We talked a little bit offsite there, but we're going to talk about information governance, digital migration, and a little offsite, because all these areas are somewhat bundled together. I think offsite costs, the average increase, and if I didn't mention this earlier, I should have, in offsite record storage cubic foot price for storing a box, we're seeing a 38% increase. So if your contract's expiring, don't be surprised if that price goes up in the high 30s, if not more. Okay. The whole digitization, which is a labor-intensive process, is also increasing because labor costs are increasing. And one thing that we get hit with all the time is, is it cheaper to scan or to store? It's always cheaper to store offsite. If you have a box of documents, it is less expensive to send offsite if you do not plan on touching that box until it reaches its retention period, 7, 8, or whatever number of years. If you have to touch it, then it is less expensive to scan it up front. Okay. So, okay, well, how do I know if I have to touch it or not? That's a great question. Okay. Approximately over 95% of all boxes are never touched once they go to offsite record storage. So really, only send inactive matters or closed matters to offsite, obviously. Again, if we can scan it and you think you're going to be touching it, or you're utilizing it for knowledge management or whatever, okay. But it's always cheaper to send offsite if your rates are competitive. Some firms' rates are not competitive, or their destruction rates are out of whack. So I'm going to tell you how to check that in a minute. But again, right now it's cheaper to send offsite. The whole challenge of this whole digital migration, getting rid of paper, being compliant with your information governance is, one, make sure you have an approved IG policy. Some firms have been working on their IG policy since Richard Nixon was in office. So get it approved. If you need help, get outside help to do that. And then really a logical place to start. Some firms start with hey, we're going to bring everything we have stored off-site back on-site and scan it. That's probably the worst place to start, because then you're paying a per mile fee and so on like that. If anything's off-site, it's usually typically better to leave it off-site until it reaches its retention period and then destroy it. Again, every contract's different, every firm's different, but a pretty good rule of thumb is to, once it's offsite, leave it there. Don't bring it back to scan it. Now, if you bring it back for another reason, you got to recall it because an attorney wants it, then yeah, then scan it. But, some firms are bringing stuff back to scan it, and then some firms are then sending the paper back off-site, destroy it once you have it scanned. So, on the offsite, we see firms that let their contracts lapse, then you're out of contract and the rates you're not protected at all. We like longer term contracts, 7 to 10 years. Some firms say, well, we only sign 3-year contracts here. Like, do you think you're going to be out of the offsite record storage business in 3 years? Like, no. Then sign a longer term contract so you're protected on the rates. Because once you go out of contract, it's ugly. And then digital migration is, again, firms are doing it. We just Perkins Coie, Sidley, have really made terrific strides in digital migration, getting out of the paper business. And it's not, they're big firms, they have a lot of assets, but really every firm can get a plan in place to scan and get out of that business. Biggest thing is get a policy and stop sending more work or more boxes offsite and digging a deeper hole. Okay, Corey, anything you want to add to that whole thing? I threw a lot in there for an area that I could do a whole coffee break on that. What did I miss?
I think you covered it well.
Oh, really? Jeez. Again, it's to get started. Okay. Now, we have developed an AI tool, which everyone else has too. I shouldn't say that everyone's not in the space that we're in, but every entity is trying to develop an AI tool that, one, we get asked all the time about how do my costs compare? So what we did was we took all our projects for the past really 10 years and put them into a AI database and taught that database through AI how to provide that information. And we call it Maddie. And you can probably guess why. And what we're going to ask, if you go to Maddie, and this is accessible, there's no charge for it, it's accessible through our website, is we're going to ask how many attorneys are in your firm. And we broke this down on a per attorney basis. So I'm just going to say, for the sake of argument, 250 attorneys. It's going to ask me for an email address. Enter my email address. Then it's going to ask me, what area would I like to take a look at? And I want to choose offsite record storage. And again, this is based upon all the projects that we have done. So it should be pretty accurate. I'm not saying it's going to be foolproof, but it's going to give you some idea that, hey, based upon the number of attorneys I have, I'm spending about $475,000 in offsite record storage costs. And if I go through an open competitive RFP, I can reduce that by about $147,000. So this is part of our website. You can access it through that. We'll send a link out. It's in all our footers. But if you're wondering what something is costing you and can you do better, and again, we get probably 4 or 5 of those phone calls a week and emails. Maddie's going to be able to provide that information for you. No obligation, free of charge. So take advantage of it. Love to hear your feedback. If it provides great information, let us know. If it doesn't provide information that you find useful, again, let us know. Something that we're trying to perfect. So, okay. And then last but not least, Corey, anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's very helpful. We've tested it internally, and we feel confident that it's going to give an accurate number, and it's a great way to determine how your services compare.
Without going through a lot of work and a lot of or going asking vendors for pricing or whatever, we feel it's going to provide a lot of value that firms can know where they're at. And if we have to dig deeper, give us a call. And then last but not least, we get asked all the time about managing contracts, and we do an excellent job. And we call this our phase 3 monitoring and maintenance. Once a contract's in place that we negotiated, we manage that contract for 43 of our clients. And we find a lot of opportunities for additional savings, for errors, and so on like that. We're going to provide that now to firms that we haven't done their contracts, or they just need some procurement help once in a while. So we're going to provide a fractional procurement option, flat fee for a year based upon a set number of hours. If it goes above that, we'll let you know. But the goal here is to, hey, all the savings that we bring to the table, or if we do a procurement for you, or we find errors, that more than covers our fee. So we're trying to build this as a zero cost option for firms that they need some procurement expertise. Mattern's providing it. And again, we could be your entire procurement department. We could be one part of it. We can just handle certain contracts. So if you're interested, please let us know. And lastly, we're going to start addressing some of these questions. You ready, Court? And we got about
Absolutely.
1 minute left, right?
Yep.
Okay. Looking forward to hear about supplies and centralizing or streamlining supply order processes. Okay.
So I think the approach to that, it depends a lot on what current processes are in place, but I think generally the more you can centralize spending, especially with office supplies, the better off you're going to be. Every office supplies contract that we negotiate includes a core or contract list of items, which are the items that your firm's purchasing the most. And the more you can centralize that, the more you're going to be able to adhere to that list and maximize your savings whenever that responsibility gets spread out throughout the firm. That's where you start to see departures from that list, and you're not maximizing that savings. If your firm, I think, if you centralize it in each location, we can still be successful as long as you have appropriate approvals in place. But at least having a centralized approver, or ideally a centralized purchasing, is ideal. And if you have questions about your firm in particular and how you can streamline that and implement something like that, we would be happy to discuss that with you.
Okay. We also we build into our contracts that you get a rebate based upon your spend. So if it goes up, you're going to get more of a rebate at the end of the year. So, okay, I see it's 12:46. We promise to bring this thing under time. There's about 3 or 4 questions here that we will follow up with you individually. We got some clarifications on some of them, but I would like to thank everyone for attending today. I hope you found this useful. If there's any questions or comments or follow-up, please reach out. You'll be getting if you're part of the first 25, you'll be getting your signed Matter Method book in the mail. And again, it's been enjoyable, and I hope you found it educational and enjoyable. So take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.